Okay, so I'm finally at the point where I can start installing the subfloor. So what I'm going to talk through now is just some of the prep work that I've completed recently and kind of some of my next steps here. So as you can see right there on the floor, I've installed some twine in a shoelace pattern to support the insulation that I've been putting in the floor. And I was going to use the metal hangers that I'd used before, but I decided against that because I've read that those tend to fall out over time. So I decided to go with the twine option. And that worked out pretty well. It looks very solid, very sturdy, so that is kind of what I'll probably be doing when I do the rest of the crawl space later on down the road. Back there, as you can see, I added a row of blocking. It's kind of hard to see there because of all the insulation that's in there, but I added a row of blocking to support the cast iron tub that's going to go in. I forgot that that tub is really heavy. It weighs about 325 pounds, so I added a row of blocking there. Along the back wall and along the front wall, it's really hard to tell once again because of all the insulation that's back there, but I added a second row of blocking that butts up against that first row of blocking because I'm going to have to leave about a 1/4 inch gap between the plywood edge and the wall, so I want to make sure I have enough material to screw down the subfloor. And so what I did there was just glued, and then I screwed through the face and then screwed into the side, into the floor joist there. I ran some wire for the floor heat upstairs. I'm going to be doing that bathroom somewhere down the road here. And so as you can see right there, that wire is for the floor heat upstairs. I ran it through the crawl space because I thought about running it through the attic, but accessing the panel through the attic is very difficult in this house, so I decided just to go ahead and run it through the crawl space like I'd done all the wiring for this bathroom. So that worked out great. It's all ready to go and all tucked away upstairs. On this side over here, this pipe here, that main drain pipe there, has been a problem from day one on this project. If you remember before, I had to cut around that to put the sole plate in. And so recently I thought I'd had this all finished. I thought the sole plate and everything was all ready to go. But we had the shower on upstairs and hot water was pouring through it. And as the water was pouring through that drain pipe, the pipe was expanding out this way. And so what it was doing was rubbing up against the sole plate. So I decided just to go ahead and cut the whole front part of the sole plate out. And along the back side also, when it contracted, it would rub up against the sole plate, and part of, actually it wasn't the sole plate, it was more the subfloor underneath it. Because the subfloor extends a little bit more into the hole that I cut than it should. So what I had to do was just go underneath the floor with a chisel and chisel that out. So I've got pretty good spacing around there now. I shouldn't have any issues with any rubbing or any sounds around that pipe. I've got 2 bolts installed every 16 inches on this last floor joist. This is the one I was calling the Frankenstein joist earlier in the project. When the inspector came out to examine the floor structure, he was fine with the floor as is without the bolts, but I decided to go ahead and add those in just for a little bit of peace of mind. So what I've used is, these are 3/8 of an inch by 5 inches long carriage bolts, and they're galvanized. And to drill those holes for those bolts, the holes themselves are 3/8 of an inch in diameter, just enough to accommodate the shaft of the bolt. This space here is really narrow. It's only about 10 inches wide, so I had to use a right angle attachment installed on the end of my drill so I could drill those holes. I don't have a right angle drill, so that's why I have this attachment here. So once I got the holes drilled, I inserted the bolt, and then when I got to the shoulder portion, when I was inserting the bolt, I just took a hammer and hammered it in the rest of the way to set it in place. And on the other end, I put a washer and a nut to secure the bolt in place. I'm going to talk through the transition between the tile and the hardwood flooring. And the reason why I'm mentioning that now is because I need to be prepared for how I'm going to lay the subfloor and what that means with regard to the tile and the hardwood flooring. So I put together this diagram here that shows kind of my layout, my thoughts on how I'm going to put in transition actually from the tile to the hardwood flooring. So as you can see there, on the left side I've got my tile stack here, which consists of the tile, the thin set, the self-leveling compound, and the heat mat that's underneath that. And then underneath that will be the 3/4 inch hardwood or plywood flooring underneath there, the subfloor there. And then on this side over here, I've got the 5/8 inch plywood, the 3/4 inch hardwood, and then I've got a little tiny 1/8 inch plywood piece to support the reducer that I'm anticipating that I'm going to have to put in there. And I've got some gaps in here too, probably about a 1/4 inch there, and probably, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch to a 1/4 inch here. And so my plan here is, I think the tile stack versus the hardwood flooring, I think the tile stack's going to be about a 1/4 inch taller. So I've decided to make a reducer most likely out of the hardwood flooring that I used in the hallway. And this reducer is going to be flush on both sides. So I'm trying to prevent it from overlapping, so I don't really want to have it overlapping the tile or overlapping the hardwood flooring. I want to have it flush all the way across here. And what I'll do here in the gap, I'll probably fill that with some sort of foam backer rod, and then I'll put a colored caulk on top of that that's about the same color as the grout for the tile. Okay, so as you can see here, I've got a couple sheets of plywood down, and I'm just test fitting those to make sure they fit correctly. I've got an expansion gap around the perimeter of about a 1/4 inch, so that looks good. And the first couple sheets that I'm putting in, I'm putting them in as full sheets because this is where the tile's going to go, so I don't want to have any cuts in that area. I want to have a really solid floor, a really solid foundation for the tile. One other thing, as you can see there, the grade stamp is facing downward into the crawl space so that the smooth side of the plywood is actually facing up, like it should. And so what I'm going to do now is just go closer to the doorway so you can see the cuts in the doorway also. So right there at the doorway, I've got my 1/4 inch gap for expansion and contraction between the 5/8 inch plywood and the 3/4 inch plywood. What was most important was to make sure that the width, so the width of this section here of plywood was a 1/2 inch less than the actual width of the doorway, so that I have a 1/4 inch on either side there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lay my first sheet of plywood here for the subfloor. And as you can see right there, I've marked where the edge of that first sheet will go. And that just tells me how far I need to go back with my subfloor adhesive. I've also left an escape hatch back there, so just in case I need to get underneath the floor, which I will have to do when I go to attach the heat vent over here. So I'm going to go ahead and start laying the adhesive. And as you can see, one thing I want to point out, I have the plywood laying up against the wall here. And the reason for that is I was going to come kind of lay it this way, but on this side over here, I have these stubs here. The stub outs for the sink and the stub out for the toilet there. So those were in the way. So that's why I have the plywood over here instead. And I'm just going to drop it this way. I've already tested to make sure that it will drop properly. So here's the adhesive here. Liquid nails, subfloor, and deck construction adhesive. So I'm going to put down a 1/4 inch bead on each one of the floor joists there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lay this first sheet down. Now that I got the adhesive on the floor joists. So these are the screws that I'm using here. They're 2-inch number 8 These are basically exterior wood screws, and they have a Torx bit on them, or Torx head on them, I should say. So as you remember before, I've got all my reference joists marked here. What I'm going to do first of all is just screw around the perimeter, and then I'll come back and make some lines so I know where the joist center points are. Okay, so I've got all the perimeter screws in, just to hold the subfloor down. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make some lines on here before the adhesive starts to set up, so that I can start to screw along the joist here. You see that arrow right there? So I'll screw along here, and I'll screw along here. And actually I want to add some additional screws on the perimeter also, at the front and the back especially, because I should be spacing those out probably about 1 screw every 8 inches. So I'll do that. I just wanted to get this down right now, at least get it secured to the floor. So I probably don't need to do this, but I'm always pretty terrible at making sure that I follow, especially like a line when I'm putting up drywall or I'm screwing down subfloor like this. Inevitably what I'll do is I'll miss the joist. So what I'm going to do is just draw a line in here so I can keep myself on track. So I've got a ton of screws in here, probably more than I need, but I want to make it nice and secure. I've probably got screws every 4 to 6 inches, and you can see there, and around the perimeter. So this sheet's all done pretty much.